Hey, in this video, we're talking about the journey we've started toward growing a family that feels purposeful and integrated instead of consumeristic and lonely.
Plus, we'll talk about how we realized American culture was holding us back.
I'm Landon.
And I'm Trisha.
At the beginning of 2022, we were sitting in Trisha's parents' living room in a little small town, Wisconsin. Our son Owen was about 5 months old at the time, so we were kind of at the end of the brain fog era where we were still not getting that much sleep and pretty drained overall. We were sitting there and Trisha just said to me, "Hey, I think I found a book that we should read together." And I was like, "Oh, cool. What's it called?" And she said it's called Take Back Your Family. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty interesting. Tell me more. As it turns out, that conversation was really the beginning of about a year and a half of pretty significant transformation of how we're envisioning the entire future of our family and how we live life together.
We've always been really passionate about building a family together. But as we started to read Take Back Your Family and learn more about the community behind it, it started to get us really excited about what our family can be and how that could look.
A big part of our perspective shift came from just kind of realizing more of the cultural water that we're swimming in.
Let's do a quick breakdown of how most Western families operate today, which we'll call the modern Western family.
So this is all without any spirit of condemnation or saying that people are doing it wrong or anything like that. But think about how most of the families that you know operate. What is the purpose of those families? Like, what is the reason that they're doing what they do? I know that when I was up at 2 a.m. with our son Owen trying to get him back to sleep for like the 6th night in a row or whatever, I was asking myself, like, why are we doing this again? Like, what's the point of this? I think back then I was doing this, raising this son, going to all the effort and inconvenience to try to give him the best life that he could have, to help him reach his full potential. I mean, that sounds great, right? Like, those are good things. And at the same time, you know, when you step back and you take this scenario 10 years down the road, add a few more kids or something, it's pretty easy to imagine the life that we see a lot of families end up with. A bunch of different kids and everyone's got their own schedules and everybody's running in different directions. Life feels hectic because, you know, you've got different sports and activities. Everyone's kind of into their own thing. And as time goes on, I experienced in my family, I think, and I see a lot of other families experience it where the family just like sees each other less and less because everyone's got their own stuff and their own interests. And individual, I think, is really the key word in this model. It tends to be that the individual tends to take priority over the family as a whole. And this is where I think like our American culture can kind of be invisible to us if we're not looking for it. You know, compared to every other country in the world, the US is by far the most individualistic culturally. I think that we see that play out in families, just kind of the default mindset that we find ourselves kind of just going into.
Yeah, you hear people talk about family like it's a nest. Like the kids are like the chicks that are raised until they're ready to fly away.
You got the parents being like the empty nesters at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the family is just a launch pad for the kids to launch off into their own individual adult lives. Because there tends to be less connection between generations, then essentially the family sort of resets or starts over with each generation. Like the grandkids may have a relationship with their grandparents, but there's not really a sense of continuity or continuing on their grandparents' stories.
Yeah, picking up where they left off or something like that.
Right.
This is all kind of a caricature, sort of full of generalizations and exaggerations. But I think when we look back at, you know, the vision that we had for our family, it did align with this in a lot of ways. We were asking a lot of these questions like, how can we set our kids up for success? Which I think basically meant like, how can we equip them to be individually able to fulfill their potential or be equipped to do what they're going to be called to do? And like I said, I think that's all good stuff, but I think there's also something missing from it. When you step back, our culture as a whole is pretty lonely right now. A lot of us lead lives that feel kind of pointless. How might family be able to be different to change that and like be part of making life feel more integrated and together and whole and purposeful?
So that's the model of the modern Western family. Now let's move on to the other model of family that we've been learning about, which is, as we've learned it, the Abrahamic family.
Yeah, so in this model, the family functions more like a multi-generational team on a shared mission together. So this will probably sound a lot less familiar, but instead of the individual always coming first, each individual sees their own success as being dependent on the success of the team as a whole, the family as a whole.
So it's like when one of us scores, we all score. When one of us loses, we all lose. So when I'm trying to make a decision, I'm trying to think about what is going to be the best for our family and the mission we're on, rather than maybe just what I want in that moment.
Yeah, and in fact, in this model, you tend to see that individuals are even getting their identities grounded in their family rather than each individual sort of starting from a blank slate to figure out, who am I? What is my life about? There's like this sense in which they're sort of connecting back to this family rootedness. And this is like part of what my life is about, is like what our family is doing together. And they see their story as being part of their family's story.
Yeah.
And Mr's awake. Owen woke up from his nap, so he gets to join us for the rest.
So getting back to what we were talking about with the Abrahamic family. So there are times where the family is going to be the focus rather than an individual, but there's also other times where one of us in the family might have a really strong calling to something, and the rest of us can sort of rally around that person, and we can all invest in that together.
Yeah, one of our mentors, Jeremy, was just talking about recently how like they have a daughter who may have a really like strong calling to Asia in particular. And if that turns out to be the case, then it's not just her going and doing ministry in Asia, but like the whole family is going to find ways to rally around her in doing that and invest in that together. And I just think that's such a cool idea that like it kind of gives this security that no matter what, like your family's got your back, just as you've got theirs kind of a thing, rather than each of us kind of just being on our own and doing our own thing.
Yeah.
So also there tends to be more of a passing down of assets and skills and knowledge from one generation to the next because of this connectedness between the generations.
So if you're like us, this Abrahamic family might sound less familiar, and you might have questions about it, like we definitely did before and still sometimes do. Yeah. But for now, let me just say that the more that we've learned about it, the more excited we've gotten about what it could look like for our family.
Yeah. If this Abrahamic vision of family sounds at all familiar, it might be because it's basically what the church is supposed to be. A multi-generational team on mission together. By the way, if you're not into following Jesus like we are, totally cool. Really, we should be upfront that that's the biggest reason we've been so excited about this whole model, is that it's given us for a vision for how to follow Jesus together as a family.
We both grew up in Christian families, and our families pretty much went to church together, usually prayed at dinner, all that kind of thing. When you think of most churches, the families are kind of split apart for the most part.
Yeah, at least the churches that we grew up going to were very age segregated.
Right, yeah. The kids go off to children's church, kind of separated by their own ages. Parents stay in the main worship service.
There's some real strengths to that model, I think. Like every age kind of gets an experience that's like tailored to them. But I think also like there's some challenges to that. Like when the church building is like the focal point of spiritual life, which I think in our growing up sort of was, when that's the case and the ages are all split apart, it kind of creates a missed opportunity where it doesn't really lend itself toward intimate spiritual experiences together as a family.
Right.
Well, how do we address that challenge? How about a multi-generational family team on mission?
Yeah.
I don't know if any of that is going to work at all.
As we were figuring out our family mission, we didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but we knew that the core of it was going to be following Jesus together as a family.
Yeah, and that's like what got us so excited as we heard about this, was like it sort of put off a little bit of a light bulb in our heads of like, we can actually participate together in what God is doing in the world, like as a family, and not just like individually or in a few hours a week on a Sunday morning worship service or something, but like just in the way that we live life together every day.
Yeah.
One other quick side note, as we're talking about all these different ways of doing family, it can sound potentially like we think that our families like got it wrong or something. Just want to be clear that that's not the case at all. We really both feel so lucky for the families that we grew up in, and there are so many things that our parents did that we want to continue. Anything that we're changing, we see as really just building on what we've kind of inherited from our parents. And that's what we expect our kids to do too, is essentially we're going to give them what we've got and they're going to build on that. So just a little bit of context there.
So we're really excited about where this can take our family, but it has made us rethink a lot of things, including where we live.
Yes, in fact, we are moving, but we don't actually know where. So check out this next video to hear more about our cross-country adventure to try to discern where God might be calling us to build our family team's base camp.
Woohoo! Can you say hello?
Hello.
Say it here. Say hello.
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 Hello.